Well, Merry Christmas. Christmas happened here this week. It looks amazing, too. I mean, just amazing. I know that Tyler said thanks earlier, and really grateful to Jeannie and Sonia and just the whole team that came throughout the week and worked in this place. And even late last night, like that tree wasn't even here last night. None of this was here. This was, I think, but just crazy. Grateful. I was here Friday night. Jingle Jam was cool. Students, you guys all did an amazing job. But what snuck up on me on Friday, I did not realize how bad my heart needed Christmas. I don't know if anybody's in the same spot. Like, it snuck up on me, man. I did not know how badly I needed Christmas, and began to warm my heart Friday night, even in this series that we're getting ready to jump into, snuck up on me. I love it, and grateful for all that went in this past week. Martha and I had an opportunity to go to Charleston this past week for a few days. Some friends of ours, they treated us like a king and a queen. And it was their anniversary. Like, they invited us to celebrate their anniversary with them, but then they treated us all week. And so it was just amazing. Good food, loved. Like, Charleston's a cool town. And the whole horse carriage ride, the whole going down to Rainbow Row and Battery and looking over the water. And in the mornings, I would go to this coffee shop, put my AirPods in, and just read and chill and great. But you know what? I love coming home. Think about that. We can go to the craziest places on the planet, but nothing's like home. Nothing is like coming home, sleeping in your own bed, using your own bathroom. I don't even go there, but I'm talking about. Just the comfort of your own home. There's nothing like it. Home. Now, when I say that word, there are images that immediately pop into your head. You begin to think about where you grew up. Most of you, if I say, hey, where's home for you? Your head goes back to where you grew up. And you start to think about people and the place of home for you, and food. Isn't that crazy how home, immediately I begin to think about food? Like South Jersey, come on, pizza, hoagies, cheesesteaks. I start thinking about Italian food. That's where my head goes to home. Some of you, even as I'm talking about it, you're going back there. And you think about family and you think about different experiences that you've had with family and friends and home. It's just for all of us, it's a starting place. For some of us, a haven, and which sounds crazy because when you look at the statistics, Americans are known to be the most mobile people on the planet. More than any other country in the world. Americans move, in their lifetime, they move a little over 11 times in their lifetime. And when they do move, they contribute substantially to the 450, billion, with a B, dollars spent annually on renovation. Crazy. And so I'm thinking of these stats. I'm like, how could you ever have this sense of home when you're moving all the time? And when you do move, your house is changing, how could you ever have this sense of settledness and of home? And then I started thinking, Paul, you resemble those stats. That's you. So from 0 to 18, I lived in one home in South Jersey, different than North Jersey, South Jersey. I know it's not that big of a state, but it is different. But since then, Martha and I have lived in 12 homes. So it averages about 4 years for a house. Some of those were transition, a couple of those a little bit longer. Doesn't matter, wherever we were, it was home. And I might add, we contributed substantially to the home renovation industry every time we moved into a new house. But that's not just me. Like, if I just started to play back the conversations that I've had with family and friends and acquaintances over the last couple months, everybody talks about it. Everybody's doing something in their house. It's crazy. Everybody's involved in making it look better or buying a house or looking at real estate or whatever it is. The conversation is all over the place. In fact, a couple weeks ago, I was sitting in an office and this guy said, whose wife just recently repainted the interior of their house. And he said, Paul, literally, I can feel the square footage of my house shrinking with how many times we have changed the color in our house. We are all doing HGTV. It's the third most watched station in America. 8 out of 10 homes. You could 24/7. 24/7, you can watch whatever you want. How to make over a home, how to bring it up to the current styles, whatever. Building from scratch. It's crazy. Most of our budgets are in our homes. Whether it's our first home, second home, whatever, fixing it up. If you don't have a home, you long for one. And if you have one, you're looking for one that might be better, or it might be bigger, or it might be different. And if you've had a bad home experience, you can't wait to leave home so you can build a better home for you. Better experience. Right now, if there's crisis in your home, or if it's unsettled in your house right now, chances are there's an unsettledness in you. There's such power in home. If we hear somebody's homeless, man, our heart goes out to them. What is the big deal about home? Have you ever asked yourself that question? Why is that such an anchor in our lives? Well, I believe the story of the Bible can tell us. And we're going to jump into that in this series. We'll talk about the place of home today and people. Next week, what happens when home goes south in week 3, and then coming home, the last week of this series. But as we jump into this series, I think the Bible has a lot to tell us, maybe at a deeper level than you have ever thought about before. And when you open your Bibles, like when you just turn to the first page, we are all introduced to the perfect home, the Garden of Eden. It was perfect, harmony, perfection, bliss, where there wasn't anything that needed to be changed, praise Jesus, right? No need for a bigger home, no renovation, no repainting, no money shortage, no fighting or yelling, no communication breakdowns, no divorce, no stress. You could literally say that it was heaven on earth. God was there. He created Adam and Eve, and there was perfection in their relationship and their relationship with God. It was this settled state of home that we all long for, where all is well. But you turn the page. You just turn the page in the story of the Bible. And you see with the influence of Satan that Adam and Eve begin to question what they had versus what they could have. We never do that, do we? We're always satisfied with what is right in front of us. No, not really. So they chose to try to live life outside of God's design. It was the first attempt at home improvement to make it better than what God established. And the result? Disaster. Disaster. Dysfunction and the breakdown of home, the breakdown of family. Immediately as a result of sin, all was not well at home. There was angst in their relationship and an unrest in their soul. Does that ever happen at your house? What had been a settled state, a no place like home setting, at peace with God, was now replaced by unrest and a sense of wandering and a distance from God. And you know, as the story continues, Adam and Eve, they have two boys, Cain and Abel, where Cain kills Abel because of jealousy and anger. And you thought your home was bad. Look, we're only 3 pages into the story of God, and you've got this dysfunctional, broken family. Can you imagine? Like when we read the Bible, we're just blowing through it. Yeah, I read that before. I know what happens here. Yeah, he kills he, and we just keep moving. But can you imagine the moment with that mom and that dad? The chaotic emotions that were happening at that moment, and the upheaval in their home, and the tension, and the therapy. They would need therapy for sure. And that's only a couple pages in. And then as the story of the Bible unfolds, you see brokenness and dysfunction. And so God wipes clear the earth with a flood, except for Noah and his family. But as you see the earth repopulate, it just happens all over again. In fact, at one point, there's this group of people on this plane, and they say, hey, let's come together. They wanted home. They wanted togetherness. And they said, let's build a tower to the heavens, and let's make a name for ourselves so we'll be respected. We still do that. We still do that. Let's make a home for ourselves, independent of God, and where we can be somebody, and we can have respect from people. They, like us, wanted meaning and purpose in their lives, and they wanted a place, but they were laboring in the wrong direction. So God knew where that was going to go, and so he confused their languages and scattered them on the earth. But God began to bring course correction to this longing for a home, and God raises up a people for himself, the Israelites, to try and restore this sense of home, this longing for what people had. And so he says, I'm going to restore this. And he raises up this man, and we read it in Genesis 12. Now the Lord said to Abraham, now watch some differences here. Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house, all of the things that brought comfort and identity for him, to the land that I will show you. Not you, but I will show you. And I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Don't read over that too fast. Again, we read the scriptures and we know that. We've read that before. If you've been around church any length of time, you know this, you know the story. But God was inviting Abraham to something that wasn't orchestrated by him, but orchestrated by God. And it reminds me of Psalm 127:1, unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. Abraham was 75 years old at this point. Like he had, although he didn't have any children at this point, he had possessions, he had family, he had servants, and he had made a life for himself, but he packed all of that up to respond to this invitation that God was calling him to. Why? Why would he do that? What did he see? Immediately we start connecting all the dots because we've read forward in the story and we can see it. And we know he becomes the father of the nation of Israel, like father of the Jews. And so we know that. We connect the dots all the way to Jesus. Before we know it, we have the whole story kind of in our head. But I want to encourage you, just slow down for a minute and realize what he's doing here. Leaving everything that is known for something else. And the writer of Hebrews kind of gives us, it broadens the picture for us. Hebrews chapter 11. I'm going to read these 8 or 9 verses, starting at verse 8. By faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to a place that he was to receive as an inheritance. And he went out, not knowing where he was going. By faith, the word that we're going to see often, he went to live in the land of promise as in a foreign land, living in tents with Isaac and Jacob, heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city that has foundations, whose designer and builder is God. By faith, Sarah herself received power to conceive, even when she was past the age, since she considered him faithful who had promised. Therefore, from one man, and him as good as dead, were born descendants, as many as the stars of heaven, and as many as the innumerable grains of sand by the seashore. These all died in faith, not having received the things promised, but having seen them and greeted them from afar, and having acknowledged that they were strangers and exiles on the earth. For people who speak thus make it clear that they are seeking a homeland. If they had been thinking of that land from which they had gone out, they would have had opportunity to return. But as it is, they desire a better country. That is a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared for them a city. The invitation that God was extending to Abraham was not to a piece of land that we have all come to know as the promised land. He already knew what that was like. To live on land, to have possessions. And he'd been there, done that, and it left him wanting. It left him longing for more. So when the invitation came, he responded. We're like that. We've all experienced the same thing. Like, is this all there is? Like, we want something really bad, and then we get it. And it satisfies us for a little bit. But then after a while, like, I'm tired of that. And we move on to the next thing. Home for Abraham, it was never about the land for him. It was never about the land. It transcended the land. It wasn't seeing is believing for him. We use that a lot. We have to see stuff. We have to know stuff before we can believe. For Abraham, it was different. He didn't have all the details. Believing for him was seeing. The Bible is clear that Abraham and others, when you read down through Hebrews chapter 11, that they hadn't realized it yet, but they could see something. They could see it. They imagined it. They longed for it. They knew it had to be more than what they were currently experiencing on earth. What was it that they saw from afar? Have you ever asked yourself that when you're reading the scripture? What did they see? How were they able to see this heavenly country that the author mentions? They somehow knew, like in the depth of their soul, like they really knew that what they were experiencing on this planet, it wasn't the end of the road. It wasn't home. That God had more in store for them as they chose him to be their Father. It was this longing, it was this hopeful belief for something different. Where did that come from? Like, you could look at Abraham or anybody else mentioned in the 11th chapter of Hebrews, and you can try and look, what did they see? What did God give them some kind of out-of-body experience? Did he give them like details that we don't seem to have? Did he give them answers to all of their questions? You're not going to see that. But what you're going to see when you open that chapter, you're going to see this one word that keeps repeating over and over and over again. It's faith. It's faith. Abraham simply believed. You're like, no, Paul, come on. There's got to be something else that you can see. Well, you can go back and you can go feverishly back to the beginning of Genesis, and you can read those chapters leading up to when Abram leaves, and you're like, okay, what was it here? Like Abraham had to see something. His questions had to be answered, something. You can see where he had some conversations with God and where God appeared to him, so maybe. But I think Ecclesiastes tells us what Abraham had and what we all have, this longing inside of us, where he says in Ecclesiastes 3, chapter 3, verse 11, he, God, the God of the universe, has put eternity into man's heart. This longing for home. Abraham, along with every other human being, we were all born in the image of our Creator and designed to be in relationship with him, to be where he is. To be with God is to be home. That's where home is. He implanted within us this longing for home that we see in Abraham that will never be fully satisfied until we're where he is. That's what moved Abraham. That's what moved him to where he was, away from comfort to pursue a life that was orchestrated and designed by God himself. Within all of us, there is this internal longing for us to be right with him, to be right with God, and to be in relationship. I am most at home. Prayed it this morning. I am most at home with God. The problem is, for me and for us on this planet, is we keep looking for home and we keep looking for more in all the wrong places. Our lives get crowded out. They get crowded out, and our focus turns to the horizontal. It just turns to the horizontal, and we totally bypass the vertical. And we get stuck there. It was like those people I just talked about, the Tower of Babel in Genesis. We want to make a place of our own so I can be somebody, independent from God, so I can be respected. It was the same problem with the descendants of Abraham as you move forward. Many of you know the story. The Israelites were enslaved for over 400 years before God goes through great lengths to bring them back to home, to try and reinstate this place of home that he promised, where they could be his people and live in relationship with him and enjoy him. Listen to these verses in the end of Joshua. It says this, "Thus the Lord gave to Israel all the land that he swore to give to their fathers." God made good on his promise, and they took possession of it, and they settled there. They made it home, and the Lord gave them rest on every side, just as he had sworn to their fathers. Not one of all their enemies had withstood them, for the Lord had given all their enemies into their hands. Not one word of all the good promises that the Lord had made to the house of Israel had failed. All came to pass. Home, sweet home. Finally, man, a place they could live happily ever after in the presence of God. Not quite. Again, when you turn the pages, you find that soon after Joshua, Moses' successor, and all of the elders or leaders that led with Joshua, as soon as all of those guys died, peace at home disappeared. They lost perspective. It's the story I've been saying since I've started talking over and over again, like Adam and Eve in the very beginning. They looked to reconstruct, renovate, and redecorate God's design and how they were to live in the land he gave them. They started looking at all of the other nations around them. I want to be like them. I want to have their gods. I want to marry somebody from their nation, from their family. Again, independent of God, and they began to dismiss God's good word. Although God was inviting them, we just got out of this series in Leviticus, God was inviting them into relationship with him. You want to find home, you're going to find it right here. But they dismissed that. They dismissed all of it. They thought maybe there was something else, and they chased it, and eventually it led to their captivity. That's what we do. We chase stuff, and it eventually leads us to a dead end. That's our family. That's where we get it. That's our ancestry. That's us. Enter Jesus. Enter Christmas. Christmas marks the moment where we celebrate more than the birth of Jesus. We celebrate the way home. We celebrate the way home. We celebrate what Abraham believed by faith and the prophets foretold before they could even see it, literally see it. It's what John says in John 1, the true light, Jesus, which gives light to everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, yet the world did not know him. He came to his own to bring home, and his own people did not receive him. But here's a verse. But to all who did receive him, who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, to be home. Who were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. God made a way home. That's it. That's his desire for every person on the planet. For them to see home, to experience what he intended from the very beginning. A relationship where you are at home with him in the place where he is, made possible through the person and work of Jesus. A place that resembles the Garden of Eden. Later, John would write these words in Revelation 21 to give us a glimpse of what he saw. He says, "Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, 'Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people. and God himself will be with them as their God. He'll wipe away every tear from their eyes. Death shall be no more, neither shall be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore, for the former things have passed away. That's what they all saw. And you might be sitting there saying right now, man, that, as beautiful as that sounds, that is not my present reality. You might be saying, I get this, Paul. Like, I get it. Read the Bible, some of the Bible. I know. Like, I know this isn't home. I know earth isn't home. That I'm just passing through, and that heaven is my home. But if I'm honest, I have a hard time seeing that right now. I find that my attention is drifting to all of the other stuff that's in front of me, all of the temporal things, the here and the now. Man, Paul, I got a lot of stuff going on right now. You have no idea. Like, there's so many things happening in my life right now. And I have a hard time with this eternal perspective of life. Me too. So how do we get there? Like how do we live with an eternal perspective? You're going to have to come back next week. And we'll talk about it. But I want to give you something before we leave. Now, faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. For by it, the people of old received their commendation. By faith, believing before seeing. We understand that the universe was created by the Word of God, so that what is seen was not made out of the things that are visible. And without faith, it's impossible to please Him. For whoever would draw near to God must believe that He exists, and that He rewards those who seek Him. So this week, my homework for you is ask the Holy Spirit to help you to see what you cannot see, and to have an eternal perspective. And we'll talk some more about it next week.